Good morning. It is Wednesday, the 5th of March 2025, and it's just past 1100 hours Central African time. In this episode of Quo Vadis, I'm going to talk to you about something that I did discuss on one of my live Boerbeskuit shows. But I received a lot of messages about it and people asking me to do it in English and they want more information around this view of mine. And this is about the fact that I see differences in relationships as skunks. Now, if you look at this picture, most of you will smile and think, wow, that's a cuddly little animal. Yes, it is a cuddly little animal, that's what it looks like. But that thing is armed with a gland that can spray you with an undescribable stinking piss. That's what it is. That's his defense. And the problem is, you have really very little control over whether he's going to use that piss gland or not. You don't have control over it. It's all in his hands. He is in control of that thing. And this is how I see the realities of relationships. Now, I'm going to explain this thing about relationships in the following. I'm going to see a relationship as a farm. And the farm has got cattle and sheep, vegetables and chickens and a nice river with fish and lots of trees with shade and lots of fruit trees and things like that. So it is in general a farm that has got the potential of being very productive and provide for you in future. Now, when I talk about relationships, yes, the relationship between a man and a woman is a very important relationship in our lives, because that relationship cuts to our being, what we are. And that is how the Creator created us. He did not create us to be alone. Now, it's important to understand that when I talk about relationships, I don't only mean the relationship between a husband and wife. I mean and include the relationships with people, all types of people in your life. Whenever you meet a person, that is usually also the moment that the potential is there for a future relationship. And that is why we need to be very careful and we need to be honest to ourselves. That is the biggest thing. You need to be honest to yourself when you evaluate a relationship. Now, it is impossible, yes, I say impossible, to meet a person that is 100% the same as you. It's got the same views, the same tastes, the same attitudes, and agree with you on everything. That is unrealistic to expect that. The reality of life is that people differ. That's how we've been created. We are individuals. And then you meet this person and you feel drawn to this person, and talking to the person and watching the person and listening to the person, you realize, but this relationship can have a future. The two of you can have a productive life on this farm. And when I say farm, I'm talking not only about a physical farm, I'm talking about a concept. It's a farm in your life. And we've got lots of farms. Now, the thing is this, you will notice differences. You will notice differences very quickly. And then the challenge comes. How do you manage those differences? And I'm going to call those differences skunks. You're going to see these skunks. Now, if you are honest with this partner of yours, the two of you together will identify the skunks very quickly. And there is the responsibility will be yours, the couple, the two, the partners, the partnership, the associates. How are you going to manage the skunks, because the skunks is a reality? Now, my advice to you is to put that skunk in a cage. And if you look at this image, you will see that this cage is standing in a veld on a farm, a physical farm. And if you look carefully at the image, you will see that there's lots of trees and veld flowers and meadows. And in other words, there's a lot of land, a lot of space away from this cage. Because you must understand that cage contains that little skunk. That thing that can piss on both of you is now in that cage. And that is what you have to try and do very early in a relationship. Identify the skunks and cage them. Because once those skunks is caged, and both of you respect one another enough to leave that bloody cage alone, you have a future. You have the opportunity of having a future. But that skunks must stay caged. Now, me, I'm the type of guy that once those skunks have been caged, I walk away from it. I never go near that cage again. I don't. Because I don't. Why must I take the chance of getting close to the cage and the skunk piss on me? And that is what we are challenged with. How do we manage those skunks in the cage? Because we know from experience that you go near that cage and someone is going to get pissed on. That's for sure. And that makes people react violently when the skunk piss on them. Now, you must also understand that when you have decided to cage the skunks, there is always the reality that at some stage you're going to get close to that skunk cage. And then the challenge will be, how do you manage that close proximity to that skunk cage? You're going to allow those skunks out to roam. If you do that, you've got problems. Because then that whole farm is dangerous. Wherever you go, a skunk can jump out from under a bush or come from behind a tree or what and piss on you. And that is when the farm becomes a nightmare and you're all over the place and you end up in this position. This is what can happen when caging the skunks. And you stand there and you look at this image and you realize this place, these skunks cannot be caged. They can't be caged. And someone is always going to let skunks out. And unfortunately, the reality is that skunks draw other skunks. And that is when you have to be mature enough to evaluate the situation and realize the reality of the skunks and sell the farm. Because there is just no way that you can cage the skunks. And then the challenge comes when you sell that farm. When that for sale sign turns into sold, what are you going to do? Are you going to walk away from that and find another farm? Or are you going to burn the farm now to kill the skunks? The skunks are no longer yours, you've sold it, but you still want to kill them. And that is when relationships end in these bloody battles where nobody wins. All you have is all people covered in skunk piss. And nobody else in the community wants anything to do with any one of them because they stink. That is a massive challenge, because the reality of life is that sometimes there are just too many skunks. And it doesn't matter. That farm, there was a nice river that you both enjoyed, and there was a nice tree under which you sat and have a picnic or a braai or what. And those were precious to you. But the facts were, the fucking skunks were everywhere. So despite of the nicety of the river and the tree, you must also say goodbye to that, because you know from experience that you move an inch and the skunk is on you. And that is a big challenge. And sometimes we tend to focus so much on the skunks that we lose sight of the benefits and advantages of the rest of the farm. Now some people, they get to this place where there's a lot of skunks, but they've called in the vet and they've allowed the vet to remove those piss glands from these skunks. And these people, they operate well among the skunks. But if you do that, you must always understand there's a risk that a roaming skunk from a neighboring farm that has not been disarmed can land among your skunks. And worst of all, those skunks, they will have babies, and those babies are not disarmed. So when you are confronted by these skunks, you have to be honest with yourself and make a decision that is based on facts. Is it worth your while to risk your future with a relationship where there's skunks roaming free? Yeah, they've been disarmed, but they're there. And I have explained to you what is the dangers of those skunks. So we need to focus on one reality, and that is that you cannot lie to yourself. Yes, you can lie to yourself, but the problem is if you believe that lie, you've got a major fucking problem, because then you are actually living a lie. And is that what you want? Is that what you really want? So this morning, I'm going to show you this image again. If you have that situation where there's one skunk and that skunk is safely caged, and both of you respect the skunk cage, and by definition respect one another, to leave that skunk alone. I have relationships in which the skunk is caged. No, I never go near that cage. I've got absolutely no interest in going near that cage. I use the farm and I enjoy the farm, and I totally ignore that skunk in the cage. And it's a productive farm. But that takes a lot of mental self-discipline. And that is why I have said it in my live show. In every relationship you have, you must understand that there will be a skunk cage. And it depends on your maturity and honesty, how you handle that skunk cage. I have friends that we do have differences. We have our skunks, but our skunk is caged, and not one of us go near that skunk cage, because we know that there's no chance of the one convincing the other one that his skunk has been disarmed. It does not happen. And it's usually when we are ignorant and stupid that we allow a skunk that's in a cage to spoil the whole farm for us. And we have to think long and hard about that, because every relationship has skunks. And it will be your responsibility to make sure those skunks get caged, because that person can be so valuable to you that you are not willing to surrender the opportunities and the potential of a future with that person if you do not cage the skunk. You must cage that skunk, and then both of you must respect the cage. We do get this situation many times in relationships. Look carefully at that image. That one person has got skunks that's not in a cage. And this situation is a challenging situation when this happens in reality. And that is when discipline and maturity and a cool mind must take control. and realize that doesn't matter how much effort you put in, the other party is not willing to cage the skunks. They're not willing to cage their skunks, and they are fucking dangerous to you. So no matter how big the potential of the farm is, walk away, because you're gonna get pissed on, for sure. And that is not nice. And usually, after the skunk's pissed on you, you can easily turn into a nasty person yourself. And instead of taking the responsibility for your stupidity to get into the proximity of those free-roaming skunks, you are angry at everybody around you, and you don't take ownership of your own stupidity to walk in among the skunks. And that is what you have to think about, how you manage the skunks in your life, because they are a reality. They are there, they're everywhere. But I have seen it, and I have experienced it myself in relationships where the skunks are caged. Some relationships is one skunk. Other relationships, there's a little bit more. It is a case of, there's a lot of skunks here, but once the skunks are caged, the relationship is great. And then the challenge is for both partners to respect that damn cage and maintain that cage. Make sure that cage gate doesn't get open. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I have relationships where the skunks are caged for years and there's no issues. But then I've also experienced relationships where everything was going fine on the farm. And then one morning I wake up and I walk out on the veranda and skunk piss on me. And if I look, I say, yes, that other guy, that partner, he opened the damn cage. Well, that's when you make the decision. Are you going to invest energy and time in caging the skunks again, or just put a for sale board up? That is your decision. And you must always understand, choices have consequences. And if it was your choice, you have no option, you have to live with the consequences. Unfortunately, many people try to project those consequences onto other people and keep other people responsible for their own shit. That is something that is human, but that is something that you can also master. So, let me conclude. This situation is most probably the case in most relationships in the world. There's at least one skunk in a cage. But with that skunk in the cage, that relationship is fine, as long as both parties respect that cage. And that's it. Yeah, sometimes you'll get together and you'll start talking about the skunk. And it does happen that the owner of the skunk realizes, shit, maybe it's time to call in the vet and get this piss gland out. And they do it. Many people do it. So the skunk is still there, but the skunk is harmless. And it can happen. And I've seen it happen. And I've experienced it. But the problem comes when you try to convince that person to disarm the skunk. Then you've got a major fucking problem. Because that person likes his skunk. And he's in love with his skunk. And he's committed to his skunk. Now you want to mutilate his skunk. And that is going to create problems. The ideal situation is when the two of you are standing there and you're discussing the skunk. And the owner of the skunk realize, wow, maybe it's time to call in the vet and disarm the skunk. Because this skunk is actually fucking dangerous for our relationship. And that is the ideal. But, I'm saying it again, do not allow a skunk to spoil the whole farm. Don't do that. There is a way out. The way out is caging that skunk And then the challenge is, once that skunk or skunks are caged, to respect the cage. I hope there's some value for you in this, and that you can maybe salvage some farms by identifying the skunks and caging them. I'm sure all of us can find farms where it is actually quite easy just to cage a skunk. And then suddenly that whole farm is there for everybody to enjoy, for both of you to enjoy. Think about that. Please give me a like and a subscribe and share the thing. And let me know your feelings about it in the comments. Say. But it's important. Like and subscribe to the channel, because that is how the channel can fight the forces that try to keep these types of messages away from people. Have a great day. I almost forgot. Happy skunk hunting.